And we are back. Well, I hope you had a chance to step away to get the snack or nutrition of your choice. Um, our next presenter, you might have heard him chiming in for a sound check there, is Garth Lemke of Jasper National Park. Garth has 28 years of experience in the avalanche industry, mainly working for Jasper National Park. I know he wears a whole bunch of other hats too, but those parks guys are pretty humble with their bios they've submitted. Anyway, Garth is going to talk to us about explosives in the time of COVID. Garth, I think you're just getting set up, and I'll just note that your webcam is not on at the moment. There you are, webcam on, sound check.
Sound check, you guys hear me?
Yep, you just hit presentation mode and you're ready to go.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. How does that look and sound from your end?
Looks great.
Go, oh, you were good to go, and now it's your presentation just went back to your desktop mode.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there.
So I'm just seeing your desktop there, Garth.
Yes.
You go to your control panel with under the show button. There's a little drop-down menu and pick your presentation.
It was just working fine.
Now we just have your webcam and now your desktop.
Why is that not working now?
Sorry, folks. Garth, when your presentation was up, what did you click on in order for it to?
I did not click on anything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotta love technology, hey?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna unshare the screen with you and share it back to you. And when the pop-up window comes in, if you could pick your presentation link there, and we'll see if that's gonna help us out. Bear with us, folks.
Yeah.
There. Oh. Thanks everyone for your patience. We'll just give Garth a moment here to get his stuff sorted. Thanks everyone for what's been a great conference so far, and we really appreciate the questions and a big note of appreciation to our presenters.
Oh, how's that?
Winner.
There we
see
go.
Your presentation. We see you. We got great audio. It's all yours.
Okay. So I thought it would be relevant with the COVID-19 global pandemic, do a little presentation on using explosives for highway control and how we integrated the COVID-19 protocols. This is a presentation put together by help with Darren Vonk and myself. This picture is located about 1 hour south of Jasper, just for context, down the Parkway south of Jasper town site. This is at Parker's Ridge, where we typically stage for a lot of our explosives control work on the highway. And this is just south of the Columbia Icefield Center. So further context, in COVID-19 pandemic, highways were required to stay open. A lot of the major corridors obviously were open. For us, what we do is we maintain Highway 93 from Jasper to Saskatchewan Crossing, and also the Maligne Lake Road, which is a side road. We all know COVID is contagious, and I think that's a bit of an understatement as to what's been going on around the world. The obvious thing, explosives require a large team effort. Interdepartment and multidiscipline are involved. And we obviously need to work as a team for safety and operational reasons. This ranges from organizing the equipment, vehicles at the office in the morning and the day before, collecting and transporting hundreds of kilograms of explosives, constructing the explosives, closing roads, and deploying either by ground or helicopter, and the final demobilization. We all know with the situation that one case of COVID on the team can totally incapacitate the entire team, whether there was direct or indirect contact. I think that's pretty clear in the situation that's going on. There were cases that we know of, confirmed and suspect, within our Jasper office and also within our visitor safety team, which made us very vigilant in how we managed the situation. As it developed, there was a lot of uncertainty, but very little direction from the organization and management. That's understandable. Everyone was grappling with the situation and no one really knew exactly what to do or what the right thing to do was. So we bought a whole bunch of PPE. If you see this picture on the left is full PPE. So that's a Tyvek suit, respirator mask with P100 filters. Those are good for 99% of aerosols and or particulates down to 3 microns. And of course, gloves, safety goggles, and a full face shield. Versus the picture on the right, which is an N95 mask, gloves, hand sanitizer, glasses, and he's also holding a surgical mask. In experimenting with this, it was unreasonable to have the full Tyvek suit. This created a hazard in itself, fogging, physical exertion, so on and so forth. But with that being said, that is the outfit that is part of our protocol if we're responding to an emergency situation with someone with a known or suspect COVID conditions. The picture on the right, it was just more functional and safe as long as we followed all the good physical distancing guidelines. In a nutshell, what you see on the right is what we wore starting first thing arrival at the office. We're starting to mingle with each other, we're collecting vehicles, we're meeting, and we wore that PPE to the end of the day, and sometimes we'd change some of the equipment throughout the day. To start us off, vehicles are important for explosives control. So we developed some specific protocols to do with our vehicles, and these included 1 person per vehicle for all staff attending, ranging from highway staff to outside agency flaggers. The first picture I showed, there's lots of vehicles parked there because everyone had their own vehicle. On top of that, we organized protocols that we'd have 2 visitor safety staff sharing a vehicle based on opposing shifts, reducing personal other personnel interacting with the vehicles. So for example, if a person worked Monday to Wednesday, they would have the vehicle, and then they'd go on days off, and then the next person would have that vehicle from Thursday to Sunday. Vehicles were strictly sanitized before use, situational dependent during use, and most definitely post use. Only assigned vehicles were occupied by the person that was designated to be with the vehicle. Gone are the days of, I'm just going to hop in the vehicle and drive 10 feet. Vehicles were equipped with their own hand sanitizer and spray. Operators were expected to maintain their own vehicles during the day. And we had a person floating around with hand sanitizer, just touching up areas that were touched frequently by others. And before the day began, the day before, strict instructions pre and during the operation were provided to flaggers and other visitor safety staff, so they had an idea of what PPE to bring and what the expectations were. All right, so how did we deal on site with making explosives? So generally speaking, we had one person deal exclusively with all the explosives. For example, the bomb truck was one person. Unfortunately, they had to move hundreds of kilograms throughout the day. By the end of the day, he had moved bombs in and during and out of the truck. We were vigilant for the 2-meter spacing. N95 masks were used. And exclusive tasks were given to each person. For example, typically we would form a conveyor belt technique with the bombs. So one person would grab the cap fuses, another person would grab the bombs, another person would tape the bombs, another person would put them in the bag. We found that exposed one bomb to 4 different pairs of hands. So we initiated start to finish. One person handled the cap fuse, put it together, carried it over to a helicopter to reduce multiple people touching the bombs. And it was useful to have an on-site safety officer. So someone that just floated around, mentioned to people about physical distancing, made sure people weren't intermixing with vehicles, so on and so forth. So some specific protocols around the avalauncher. We got this down to a 3-person team, so a small team to reduce the magnitude if anyone was to have COVID and get exposed. So we're basically looking at one person handling the avalauncher, hooking up the trailer, taking the tarp off. Another person, they just handled the remote trigger. And then the third person was the recorder. So a small 3-person team. Of course, everyone had N95 masks and gloves. Specifically for the gunner and the assistant gunner to do when they're loading the payload, because now you can't maintain the physical distancing. We came up, it helped, it wasn't optimal, to stand on opposite sides of the breech, keeping as much distance as possible when you're loading the payload. Okay, so specific protocols we utilize for hand charges is, again, I think it's important to emphasize one person designated, building one bomb, beginning to end, carrying it where it needs to go. That reduces the number of hands on. We discovered these rubber gloves, they can be quite slippery with the hand charges. We mitigated that. Rather than working on the tailgate of the bomb truck, try to maintain physical distancing. We would put a burlap sack on the ground and do all that work on the ground on our knees. That reduced any kind of drop hazard of it skittering out of our hands onto the ground. Also, we use a lot of electrical tape. That was a challenge with rubber gloves. Just found sometimes you had to take the rubber gloves off to get the tape to work. Not too sure what the solution is there. We did specific protocols for helicopter charging. Some of these were one helicopter team for the entire mission. So in the past, we've done swapping out personnel because some people get nauseous, some people need a break. It's not ergonomic leaning out the door. But in this case, 1 2-person team for the entire day. Of course, the usual masks, gloves, sanitizing before and after and during. This picture, you could see he's wearing an N95 mask and goggles. We did find goggles were preferred over sunglasses. Sunglasses with the mask tend to fog up relatively quick. That becomes a hazard in itself. We kept the doors and the windows open for best ventilation. We did utilize a 2-person team. We typically go with a 3-person team, a navigator up front, bombardier, and an assistant bombardier in the back. We reduced that down to a 2-person team. And of course, in a helicopter, physical distancing is not possible. So I spoke to a few folks out there in the industry, just trying to get different perspectives. These are some notes I got from talking to Matt Callahan. For those that know him, he's the pilot out of Aero Helicopters in Revelstoke. So he said, Transport Canada is requiring passengers to have a mouth covering. That does not mean it's an N95. It could be a cloth buff, could be a surgical mask, but that is a Transport Canada requirement, and that's what they're following. Definitely all the companies are doing extensive efforts in sanitizing everything pre, during the flight, and post-flight. He did suggest if we're doing a lot of helicopter work, that as companies, we should consider purchasing our own headsets. That's a source of contamination. We all know you do need the mic really close to the mouth in order to communicate effectively. If you have your own headset to use, you can better manage that tool. Other items that companies were doing, and this is from company to company, some are only going with 2 passengers in the back. Some are saying no one occupies the co-pilot seat. Some are going with full passenger loads. So that is not Transport Canada specific, that's more company to company decisions. Some are experimenting with, you might come across this, a few have installed a plexiglass shield between the front and the back. Matt feels that this is more of a feel-good strategy, and even with the plexiglass shield, the physical distancing is not really being maintained. Plus, a shield in that position may create more risk in terms of emergency egress and other issues. So Matt mentioned a bunch of these points, are good to emphasize. Pilot's experience with the avalanche targets is critical. So you can get away with the 1 bombardier in the back. It can be quite busy for him if he's looking to navigate the helicopter and also record and throw bombs. So there's 3 things that 1 person is trying to accomplish. But if you have a good experienced pilot, you can just stipulate, take me to shoot number 1, and can be effective that way. The surgical mask and or the cloth buff is best, we discovered, for the helicopter mic. You'll notice the N95 mask that we've been using. It can push the mic quite far from the mouth, making communication quite muffled, where you can still keep the mic close with a surgical mask and or a cloth buff. He also mentioned, now that we have all this stuff on, we're sticking our head out the door, it's windy, it's potential for rubber gloves and masks to go out the door, which we all know is bad. So some of those items being small, if they go into the engine intake or the pitch link, could have severe consequences. Matt feels it's a low probability, but it's still a risk. We all know the industry still at this point is basically shut down, except for search and rescue and avalanche control on highways. I asked Matt, has he come across cases with pilots or passengers? And most definitely, him and other companies, there are confirmed cases of passengers with the COVID-19 and pilots. And it's his opinion, these are potentially going back to February. Soliciting a little bit of information, what other operations we're doing in terms of explosives control. I spoke to Kananaskis, BC Ministry of Transport out of Revelstoke, and one of my colleagues in Banff National Park. This is more just a summary of what they were doing. They were going with one bombardier in the back, and this makes sense to me, with an N95 mask. You know, with that being said, a learning point would be try to figure out your mask, goggle, glass combo, you know, with the thought in mind not to fog up and become a hazard. They were really relying on their experienced pilots who knew the targets. And one of them were actually checking the pilots that they had no suspected, you know, past or recent COVID symptoms. Some of the challenges was we've all switched forecasting done from home. So working from home, digital, trying to figure out the links and the resources, that's a challenge in itself. Another strategy that became part of the business is really reviewing, were these control missions absolutely necessary? What happens when we do nothing? What happens if we only do partial control? Every time we get together as a team, we're exposing everyone to possible COVID-19. This spring, when this all went down, we were very fortunate that it was good weather. We relied on that. Our brains can work better in warm weather when we're comfortable. It was somewhat easy to accommodate with all these changes, but it might be a different case in stormy or -30. So what did we take from all this? So Jasper, I don't know about other organizations, I've heard a few, we're buying our own helicopter headsets. That way we can maintain the continuity and the sanitization protocols. Like I said earlier, we had nice warm weather when this all went down. It is going to be a completely different story when it's -30. It'll be a whole new learning curve. Don't know how we're going to accommodate the rubber gloves, all that stuff. You know, we really grappled with our explosives actions absolutely necessary. Another one is some of our secondary roads. For us, it was Maligne Lake. During our first storm when this happened, we shut it down. Our usual business is to do explosives control and reopen it. But the decision was just keep it closed. One less thing we have to worry about. That raised another issue with this is not really business as usual in terms of we keep it closed, but public still wants access, either in the springtime with road bikes, or companies are up there trying to get set up for the summer season. So we had to issue special advisories each day around whether or not public could access or the company could access the road. Where before we would just throw explosives and the road would be open in short order. And as I mentioned earlier, figure out your glass and mask combo. So as this all went down, we were instructed to do our best to work remotely from home. That adds a challenge in itself and understanding the technology. You're working with other companies that may not be as technology savvy. Everyone has to figure out how to do conference calls. In the past, we all met in person, and that just wasn't possible this time. Some things we have to think about down the road. It is not business as usual. We need to adjust our strategies. Like I mentioned, it might be something secondary roads get closed and they stay closed for a longer time. Consider reducing team exposure using the proper PPE and the bigger strategies. Limit team size. In worst case scenario, if you've only exposed 3, in the end, that potentially could be only 3 people off the team, preserving the rest of the team. So yeah, to wrap it up, we are in a new era. So we are trying to do our best with explosives work, but it's definitely not business as usual, and things are evolving. If anyone has any good insight to add, I'd be more than welcome to hear. And thanks for your insight, you guys. I talked to Brian Webster in Banff, and Jeremy in Kananaskis, and Val from Revelstoke, Matt Callahan, Aero Helicopters, and the Jasper Visitor Safety Team. And that's, if there's any questions out there.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Garth. I think what you are grappling with in real time is something that a whole bunch of practitioners on the line have considered and have imagined, but I think given that keeping the highways open and rescue are essential services, you've been kind of forced to the front lines. So we welcome questions from the audience. I don't see any yet. If you do, Brent.
Looks like we have no questions from the floor.
We'll just give a minute to see if those shy ponies can find the hands up button to ask, and we'll see if any more come in. I guess one question that I have for you, Garth, in terms of even using your own headsets or purchasing them and having them for individuals, that probably comes with its own cleaning protocol as well in terms of, the attachment on the end and all that stuff.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of people putting little cloth condoms over the mic part. I don't know if that's effective. I think we're trying to figure it out as we go. I think that's the wise thing to do, is to have our own headsets. Then, headsets aren't interacting with unknown people and showing up. I'm sure the helicopter companies are, doing their utmost to clean and sanitize these things, but to be absolutely safe, I think it's wise to bring your own.
Great. I think we see some questions from the floor. I'll turn it over to Brent.
Yeah, we have a question from the floor from Kevin Marr.
Hey Garth, thanks for that.
Hey, good.
As far as the glove problem goes, if you tried or considered wearing gloves with working gloves on top, especially for working in the helicopter, but also for assembling your bombs, you could wear your rubber gloves with a good working pair of gloves on top.
Yeah, I personally, I can't speak for the rest of the team. You know, I experimented with a few things, you know, the rubber gloves with the big black diamond thick gloves and then work gloves. In the end, I took off my rubber gloves and I had a good form-fitting leather glove that I use for everything. And it's a little awkward at first. You just got to slow down and learn to work with these things, because a lot of times we'd have to take gloves off to do the precise work. I think in the end, you know, the thing is not to touch your face and have some kind of glove on. Does that make sense?
Exactly, and you maybe even just work barehanded and sanitize your hands frequently, and don't pick your nose.
Yeah, and I've seen stuff, you know, they say hand washing is better than gloves. You know, maybe down the road we'll bring a big gallon thing of warm water with soap, and every so often everyone has to go wash their hands.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. Great question. And I think everybody's trying to figure out these things on the fly, whether it's hand washing or what have you. Brent, I don't see any more questions in the queue unless you do.
We have no more questions from the floor.
Great.
Oh, okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Garth. I think you explored some new ground that a lot of folks want to explore. And so thanks for being the first in the lead and sharing that with everyone today.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on.